The Vanished. A haunting true encounter in the Badlands in the vast, untamed wilderness of North America, where shadows stretch long and silence reigns supreme. A chilling statistic lurks. Over 1,600 souls have vanished without a trace. Their stories end abruptly, their fates sealed by the unforgiving embrace of the wild. But what if there was an explanation? What if there was a truth so terrifying, so ancient, that it has been whispered only in hushed tones, kept hidden from the modern world? What if one man, a young, desperate boy from the heart of South Dakota, not only encountered this truth but barely escaped its grasp, carrying with him a secret that would haunt him for the rest of his days? This is not just a story of a boy lost in the mountains. This is the harrowing account of James Townsend, the year 1962, and his face-to-face encounter with a creature that Native American legends call the Wayto Gay, a name that chillingly translates to man-eating creature. James claims these ancient beings are evolving, becoming smarter, more cunning, and more dangerous with each passing year, lurking unseen, their numbers growing, and with them, the terrifying tally of the disappeared. This is his untold story, a warning from the past that echoes into our present, and a chilling reminder of what truly lurks beyond the edge of civilization. Prepare yourself, for the truth is far more sinister than any myth. For centuries, people have vanished across the globe, swallowed by the earth, the sea, or the vast expanses of the unknown. But here in North America, particularly in its wild, majestic mountains and desolate badlands, the numbers tell a story far more unsettling. For the last 50 years, the FBI has tracked these disappearances, compiling a grim ledger of lives that simply ceased to exist. We're not talking about those who get lost and found, or those who leave behind a trail of clues. No, we're talking about utter, absolute disappearance. No trace, no evidence, no explanation. And if the official numbers are terrifying, consider this. Who knows how many more have truly vanished, unrecorded, unremembered? The real count, I assure you, is likely far, far higher. My name is James. It was 1962, and I was just 17 years old, a skinny kid growing up in Quinn, South Dakota, a stone's throw from the Badlands. We were dirt poor, the kind of poor where hunger was a constant companion, a dull ache in your stomach that never truly left. So, every weekend, my father would send me out. Go find something, James, he'd say, his voice heavy with the weight of our poverty. Bring back anything you can. My mission: scavenge for food. I'll never forget that Saturday in July. The sun beat down relentlessly, a fiery hammer on the plains, hotter than any summer I could recall. We had no fan, no cooler, just the suffocating heat and the constant sweat that soaked our clothes. Water was our salvation, and I'd drink copious amounts every day. When I went scavenging, I'd always pack a jug of water and, if we were lucky, a few meager scraps for lunch. That day was no different. I grabbed my water, a few essentials, and set off towards the forbidding beauty of the Badlands. It was a 12-mile trek to my usual scavenging spots, so I'd wake up before the crack of dawn, around 5 a.m., hoping to be back before supper. I remember the silence that morning, a profound, almost unnatural quiet as I walked the dark dirt road leading into the Badlands. Usually, I'd encounter someone, perhaps a kind soul driving by who'd take pity on a ragged boy and offer food or a few coins. But that day, nothing. Not a single car, not a soul stirring. It was as if the entire world had simply vanished, leaving me alone under a vast, empty sky. A strange eeriness settled over me, a feeling I'd never experienced before, and thankfully, have never felt since. It was a premonition, a cold whisper of what lay ahead. Once I reached the Badlands, I began my usual search, my eyes scanning the harsh landscape for wild vegetables, edible plants, or perhaps a small mammal I could catch. Sometimes, if I was lucky, I'd even find fresh roadkill, a grim but welcome bounty. Most of the day passed without success. The sun climbed high, then began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery hues, and still, my sack was almost empty. It wasn't until dusk, as the shadows lengthened and the air grew heavy with the promise of night, that my day took a terrifying turn for the worst. I was heading home, hiking along the familiar trail, the last sliver of sunlight disappearing over the horizon. I knew I wouldn't be back until very late, perhaps even after midnight, when suddenly, a searing, unimaginable pain exploded in my lower back. Something sharp, something immense, had pierced me. The force sent me sprawling forward, my knees hitting the hard ground with a sickening thud. I looked down, a wave of nausea washing over me, and saw it. A long, black, impossibly shiny claw, thick as my arm, protruding from my stomach, tearing through my shirt. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't an animal attack. This was something else entirely. I tried to turn, to see what monstrosity had impaled me, but before I could fully comprehend the horror, a crushing blow slammed into my face. Everything went black. The next sensation I remember was the agonizing scrape of rough ground against my back. I was being dragged, pulled by one leg, my body limp and unresponsive. I tried to lift my head, to get a glimpse of the thing that was hauling me through the gathering darkness, but my eyes were filled with blood, blurring everything into a nightmarish smear of black and red. I desperately tried to wipe the blood away, but it was useless. By now, night had fully descended, a thick, suffocating blanket. Even if my vision had been clear, I doubt I would have seen anything in that impenetrable blackness. I have no idea how long I was dragged. An hour, 2, it felt like an eternity, each jolt sending fresh waves of agony through my impaled body. My mind screamed, "Fight! Get up! Free yourself!" But my body wouldn't obey. It was a useless, broken thing, a rag doll in the grip of an unseen terror. After what seemed like an endless journey, I felt the air grow noticeably colder, thicker, and the darkness deepened even further. I instinctively knew we had entered a cave or a cavern. The thing dragged me a little further, then abruptly stopped, releasing its grip on my leg. Through my blood-blurred vision, I could just make out a small, flickering fire not far from where I lay. Hope, a tiny, fragile spark, ignited in my chest. But then, the despair returned. I tried to move, to crawl towards the light, but my muscles remained frozen, unresponsive to my will. My mind, however, was still clear, still racing. Had I been drugged, paralyzed by some unknown substance? As I lay there, helpless, wondering what unspeakable fate awaited me, a putrid, unbearable stench hit my nose, the unmistakable smell of rotting flesh. I started dry heaving, the convulsions sending agonizing jolts through the left side of my body, reminding me of the monstrous claw still protruding from my stomach. A few minutes later, overwhelmed by pain and terror, I blacked out again, falling into the most horrifying dreams I have ever experienced. I was there, by a campfire, watching myself from across the flickering flames. My dream self was hanging upside down, being skinned alive by a creature I could never have imagined in my wildest nightmares. It was using a crudely made knife, slowly, meticulously, peeling the skin from my body. I watched myself scream, an endless, silent scream of unimaginable pain, as life ebbed away. Around the campfire, other bodies lay, also skinned, their forms grotesquely distorted. It was a vision of pure, unadulterated horror. I don't know how long I slept, but I was jolted awake by a cacophony of loud commotion. I could move my head slightly now, and through my still blurry eyes, I could just make out two dark, hulking figures, silhouetted against the faint light of the dying fire. They appeared to be fighting, a brutal, violent struggle. The fight went on for several minutes, a whirlwind of guttural roars and furious blows, until suddenly, one of the figures collapsed to the ground in a heap. The other seized its neck, thrashing it around violently, as if badly wounded. As tears streamed down my face, the only thought that screamed through my mind was, "I'm next." I lay there for what felt like an eternity, paralyzed by terror, before I finally began to regain some control over my limbs. Slowly, painstakingly, I managed to move my fingers, then my toes. When I could finally move enough to sit up, I did so with extreme caution, slowly and silently. The fire had died out, plunging the cave into absolute darkness. I couldn't be sure if there were more of those things lurking in the shadows. My only choice was to remain perfectly still until sunrise, hoping its light would reveal my surroundings. Those hours, waiting for the sun to rise, were the longest of my life, filled with an unbearable, suffocating uncertainty. When sunrise finally came, my desperate hope was realized. The cave slowly brightened, just enough to see. My eyes were still somewhat blurry, but the shapes around me began to solidify into grim reality. As I stood up, preparing to make my escape, I looked around. There they were. the two dark figures, now still and lifeless on the ground. And beside them, several other bodies, stripped of their skin, their forms twisted and gruesome. These, I realized with a fresh wave of nausea, must have been the source of the putrid, rotting smell that had assaulted my senses. I stumbled out of the cave, trying to be as quiet as possible, though every bone in my body screamed to run. I had to hurry, just in case more of those creatures were still inside. Once outside, I took each step with excruciating care. I had no idea how high I was, and the last thing I wanted was to fall off a cliff or tumble down a steep mountain. I felt my way along, my blurry vision only allowing me to make out vague shapes, no discernible details. I walked for hours, over several mountains, across several rivers, my body screaming in protest, until finally, I reached a dirt road. The moment my feet touched that familiar ground, I collapsed in the middle of it, utterly exhausted, and passed out. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital, surrounded by nurses and two doctors. My eyesight was clear again, a blessing I hadn't realized I'd lost. They were speaking to me, trying to rouse me. The first coherent question they asked was my name. James Townsend, I mumbled. Then they asked what I was doing on that dirt road and, more importantly, how I got the massive, horrifying wound in my lower back that had gone straight through my body. "You're incredibly lucky," one doctor said, his voice grave. "It just barely missed your kidney and stomach." I hesitated, 1,000 thoughts racing through my mind. Should I tell them the truth? The entire, terrifying, unbelievable truth. In those crucial seconds, I made a decision. No, it was better to keep it to myself. I was scavenging for food, I lied, my voice surprisingly steady. I got lost, stumbled, and a branch from a log impaled me. What shocked me most was when they told me where I was. White Clay, they said, Nebraska. White Clay, that was 50 miles from the Badlands where I had last been. They then added that I was found in the Nebraska National Forest, about 17 miles from the Badlands. The shock sent a ringing through my ears, and everyone's voices faded into a distant hum. 50 miles. How had I ended up so far away? Eventually, the hospital contacted my parents, who had to hitch a ride from a friend to come pick me up, as we didn't own a car. Of course, their first question was, "What happened, James?" Again, I lied. I wasn't ready to tell anyone the truth, not yet. I wasn't even sure I understood what had happened myself. I needed time to clear my head, to process the horrors I had witnessed, before I could breathe a single word of it to anyone. It took a few weeks for life to return to some semblance of normal. And then, I decided to tell my parents the truth. The entire, gruesome, unbelievable story. To this day, I'm not sure if they ever truly believed me, but I didn't care. Over time, the story of what happened to me spread through our small town, morphing into whispers and cautionary tales. A year later, a Native American tribal leader, from one of the local Lakota tribes, a man I'd often seen around town, approached me. "Young man," he said, his eyes piercing, "I hear you have a story to tell." I agreed to speak with him. He took me to the local diner, bought me lunch, and listened intently as I recounted every detail of my terrifying ordeal. He never looked shocked or surprised. He just listened, his face impassive. It wasn't until the very end, when I had finished my story, that he finally spoke, and what he said scared the hell out of me all over again. "Young man, you are very lucky to be alive. What stabbed you from behind and dragged you to that cave was what we call the Wayto Gay. It means man-eating creature. They have been around for a very long time. Stories of them taking young people from our tribes and eating them have been passed down from generation to generation. As time goes on, they seem to get smarter." He paused, his gaze fixed on me. "Don't care if no one else believes you, James. I do, and so do my people." He then paid for my lunch, got up, and left without another word. I never ventured back into the Badlands after that experience. And I don't think I ever will. The memory of the black claw, the rotting flesh, the screams from my dream, and the chilling confirmation of the Wayto Gay, are forever seared into my soul. There are some places, some truths, that are best left undisturbed. Now, I've shared my harrowing tale, a secret I carried for decades. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? About those 1,600 vanished souls. Was James Townsend's experience an isolated incident, or a glimpse into a terrifying, hidden reality that explains so many disappearances? What do you believe happened to James? And what would you have done if you were in his place, waking up in that dark cave? Share your theories and thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might just uncover another piece of this chilling puzzle. If this story sent shivers down your spine and made you look twice at the shadows, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because out there, beyond the paved roads and the city lights, the wilderness holds secrets far more ancient and terrifying than we can imagine, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single one of them.